You get another piece of paper. Okay. I'm in the middle of nowhere, Montana. Okay. And I'm like, I got an hour and a half because I gotta go see this other family. Okay. And then you can't get anywhere in Montana fast. So I suggest let's get another piece. No, and he has a huge meltdown because the teacher said I gotta do it on this paper and I gotta do it in this square and I gotta do it this certain way. So it took me a year to get the teacher to do this. So, and I know there's probably some teachers in here. I said, can we make the boxes bigger? Okay? Let's just make them bigger. And you thought I was asking for the world. Well, and I don't have it, I apologize. My computer crashed, I don't have all my photos. And if you saw this today, you would think this is not the same kid. He can write, his homework is done, and he went from like 2% or whatever it was to like 80% through a simple intervention, okay? But part is you have to understand how the brain works. And you know, and the mom's like, just get a piece of paper, right? I mean, simple to us, but to kids on the autism spectrum, it doesn't work that way. Think about Sheldon. What side of the couch does he like to sit on? Okay, you change it. There's one when Penny's there. The very first episode, my dad came and we were watching it, and Penny sits on his part of the couch. He stands there like, you know, here's Sheldon standing there like, and he's looking around like, duh, you're supposed to get out of my seat. She doesn't move. He's wandering around trying to find a spot, but he can't. Why? Because his brain is stuck. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I want to talk a little about the autism spectrum, why they call it that. Some people disagree with me. Some people agree with me about how this is. And there's lots of different ways. Some people draw this in circles, and there's a big change coming about how they define autism. And they're actually going to call it autism spectrum disorder, which I'm like, duh, makes sense to me, right? I was trying to pull up all the criteria today, and I'm having a hard time finding the actual, because you can pull up lots of stuff, but I want to make sure I get the correct stuff. Anyway, so autism spectrum disorder, when I talk about it, if I say autism, Asperger's, I mean the same thing, okay? So it actually falls on a spectrum from one side to the other, okay? And this is my experience and lots of other people I work with, some people disagree with. As you get closer to the pervasive developmental side, those kids are usually higher functioning kids. They usually have much more language. And their IQs are fairly normal. Okay, their IQs. And IQ doesn't mean a whole lot in here other than, doesn't mean a whole lot for kids on the spectrum, I believe. So as you get closer to the autism side, they become more difficult to test. More difficult to test their IQ because of language challenges, behavioral challenges. And oftentimes I usually see their IQs are lower, but they're not really valid IQ scores because they're hard to test. Okay? Language is more impaired, you to the side, usually have better language. There's something called high functioning autism, and I don't ever use that term, but a lot of people call it that, but you don't see it in some of the literature. So it's kind of this range. So kids on the autism spectrum on the right side usually are much more challenging as far as lower communication skills, difficult to test IQ, much more impaired around social stuff, things like that. These kids down here, individuals on this side, have much higher skills. Einstein, they thought, actually was on the autism spectrum. I actually believe he was. Now they think some other people were, and I'm like, I don't think they were. Like Bill Gates. Okay, so I'm like, I've seen a lot of Bill Gates, and I'm like, does not look like it, but he could be. Okay? But Einstein, if anybody read any of his books or anything about him, he's an odd, quirky guy. Okay? Socially, he was quirky. I guess he painted the door of his house red, right? So it made it easier to find. And I said that somebody's like, no, that's not it.
He wouldn't tie his shoes.
Yeah.
Go grocery shopping, buy ice cream first.
Mm-hmm. He had certain things. Yeah, he was a very odd, peculiar guy. Yeah. Super bright guy, right? Genius. Okay. But he was just different, and that's okay, you know. A lot of people, when I mentioned, I was like, no, he can't be on the spectrum. He's super smart. And I couldn't tell you. I have kids I work with. I'm like, this guy's going to be a doctor. And actually, I know a couple of doctors in town. They're probably on autism. I had one in particular. One of my kids walked up to him and said, I think you're on autism spectrum. And the nurses laughed. And the doctor walked away and he came back and he said, how do you know? And he said, well, I have Asperger's too. And he said, yeah, I do, right? So it was really interesting. But I had to teach the kid what autism was, or Asperger's was, so it was kind of funny. So they can be super bright. We just don't know what the potential is. Temple Grandin. Anybody seen her in person? She was in Bozeman recently. Okay? She didn't talk till 4 or 5. Has a PhD, well-renowned researcher, professor at the University of Colorado, right? Colorado State, you just probably one of those two, right? I mean, she, right? But she didn't talk till 4 or 5. And they actually told her, they told her mom, and I guess her mom's still alive. She didn't know that. You should just put her away. She's never going to be able to do anything. Okay? But mom hired tutors and just persevered through it. And look where she's at today. So the point of that in the first video is we don't know what the potential is. We got to figure it out. Just like Temple Grandin's mom is, she kept working hard. She worked hard, kept working hard, figured it out. You apologize, I'm jumping around a little bit. I was going to add all this awesome stuff today, so you have to come back next year. Right? So kids on the autism spectrum, and honestly, this should be like a whole day thing, but none of us have that time. So, individuals on the autism spectrum had a wide range of abilities, intelligent behavior. They have social interaction. They can be really great at social interaction, or very poor. It's no one person is the same. Sensory stuff, these lights, they actually make a buzzing noise. Okay, some people can hear it, some people can't. Anybody heard the ringtone that teenagers have, where adults cannot hear it, but teens can hear it? How many of you have not heard of that?
I'm old.
Yeah. And I keep writing myself a note, and I'll write myself another note, I'll put that in there, right? And here's the thing, when you're younger, your ears can hear certain frequencies that you can't when you're older, right? For whatever reason. So what they do in the UK is they put this noise outside the shops to get the teenagers to stop loitering. So the adults can't hear them. Okay? So, but you can actually buy the ringtone, put it on your phone, so kids in the classroom or wherever, they can hear their phone ringing, but you can't. Now, some of us are going to hear it, okay? Some of us are going to hear it. But it's a frequency that our ears, as adults, probably 90% of us won't be able to hear. But they can. So a kid on the autism spectrum, they can hear this stuff. So imagine you're in a room. I don't know a room, a building in this city that probably doesn't have it. Okay? You go to a classroom, you have it. So you have a kid on the autism spectrum and can hear this, right? It's like some kids, it's like chalk, fingers on a chalkboard. Some kids can hear dog whistles. Okay? I had this computer, I have an older computer, and when it would come on, the fan would come on, and I could barely hear it. Right? I had a kid who was like, and instantly looked around, he's like, what's that noise? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's looking, and for 15 minutes, we're trying to figure out what this noise is. It was my computer. Okay? So I had to turn my computer off so we could finish the session, but it was driving him nuts. He had to find it. So he was kind of ruled out. So play, they vary in play. Some kids have great play, but most kids don't have good cooperative play with other kids. Okay? They don't know how to share, don't know how to take turns. They don't know how to engage in play with others. I go to a school one day a week, and there's a kid, well, I have a kid in the rural place too, does the same thing. Doesn't play with anybody, but he runs around in a circle on a playground, and he's having the time of his life, but he doesn't interact with anybody. If I try to approach him, talk to him, he runs the other way, right? So I always try to stand in his path so he comes by me. And I'm thinking, kid won't sit down, won't do anything. So I try to figure out how to do all these things with him, but that's his idea of play. Like and he's on the playground, he'll do that for hours and hours, but he doesn't play with peers. Peers come up and talk to him. It's like, nope, I don't want to play with you. So it's hard for some individuals to play and interact with others. Okay? So communication can vary. You have kids who can talk, kids who can't talk, kids who use iPads now to communicate. I got to watch a video about a kid, not until he was in high school. Mom got out a little card, looked like a keyboard, started to teach him how to type things on it. And I think by the end of the year, he was communicating through this card, and eventually got advice and could communicate like any of us in here could communicate. But it took until his high school year for them to figure out this was all trapped inside of his head. So he goes to regular classes. He's probably out of high school now. And there's regular math classes all together, and just has this communication device. Right, that helps him communicate. But he just needed somebody. His mom didn't give up, but she figured it out. So behaviors and interests. So a lot of kids, well, cognitive stuff, they can get stuck. Their brain actually is wired different than most kids on the autism spectrum. So if you go over to Europe and I was to plug this in without an adapter, it would explode, right? So anybody been to Europe? It's kind of like kids on the autism spectrum. Their brain is literally wired different, and you're trying to plug them into this room with us. It's very difficult. Some things don't make sense to them, and so it's important to kind of know. So behaviors and interests, a lot of them have specific behaviors and interests. Anybody, I could tell you some kids who could read a phone book page and recite to you alphabetically all the names and numbers, all the presidents, vice presidents, all that kind of stuff. But they can't remember, history facts, right? So it's just odd how sometimes they have specific behaviors and interests. Some kids who can tell you every make and model of the car, the year it was made, right? And then tire sizes. I don't know how, odd things like that. So specific behavior and interest can be a challenge for kids on the autism spectrum, but that can also be a good thing. So, there's kids that I know. I had one kid I worked with several years ago. He knew all the stats for all the baseball players on all the baseball teams, professional baseball. You could ask him anybody. He can tell you what their stats are. And I don't know anything about it. But he could tell you that. But mom was like, why can't you do your math? Okay, right? So, but I think, how could you use those skills and those assets? I think there's some fields, and I don't want to offend anybody that are in here, that individuals on the autism spectrum are really good at. One is IT. Because one is, sometimes you don't have to do a lot of social interaction with people, depending on what part of programming. I know some people that can program, but man, they cannot take a shower every day, okay? Who do open source program. Counts, deal with numbers every day, right? Attorneys, right? Because some of them are so factual based, they're really great at understanding some of those things. So any kind of those careers where there's not a lot of social interaction, there's a lot of, I can do this and be focused on something, and it's rule-bound. It can be very helpful. I have a kid recently, he said, I think I want to be a counselor on the autism spectrum. And I'm just thinking, all right, there's a lot of social stuff that goes into counseling. And that's why he wants to go into it, because he wants to learn more about the social stuff. And a year ago, he was going to be a doctor, and he probably could be. So we watched Sheldon. I was going to put another video in here. But sometimes with Sheldon, what they did in that video is they prompted them through all these social interactions. So sometimes what we've got to do with kids is, and this is the hard part as parents, professionals, and everything, is you have to prompt and support them through the whole social interaction. So my kids, I can say, go play in your room. And what are they going to do? They're going to go play in their room. Or we're going to stand bored, I want to play video games, right? They will. So if I told some kids on the autism spectrum to go play in your room, they have a hard time with that. And I need to coach them, you need to go play in your room, you can play with these couple of toys, and they may need to learn how to play with those toys. Just like Sheldon, what they had to do, they had to prompt them how to smile, right? They don't look like, less teeth, right? Okay, and that's really true. A lot of kids that I work with is I teach them in the moment, as we're talking to somebody, how do you respond? How do you do this? Say bye, say hi. What's one of the first couple of things you teach your kid? Bye, hi, love you, mom, dad, right? So we actually teach our kids early on, Dave, bye. Right? So you have to teach kids on the autism spectrum all those kinds of things. Think about the hidden rules that you have to teach that you and I just get. And here's the part I think about is, in a classroom, if you're in a classroom or daycare setting, and you have 20 other kids, how do you help a kid who struggles with all those thousands of social interactions, hidden rules? How do you help them? Right? You might get a pair in a class, or two, or none, right? So as a teacher, you have to help all these kids plus another one navigate the social world every day. And it's very intensive. So somebody's from Positive ABA, like that. You guys
Well, it's my daughter's, but she
Okay.
had to step out. She left her stuff.
Oh, that's right. So,
Yeah.
you know, and they can spend about 20 hours a week. If you ADA services, they get